Meghan arrived expecting a difficult reunion, but she never expected Catherine to be the person standing between her and the chapel. Before the bells finished ringing, a quiet royal christening became the setting for a deeply personal rejection. There were no shouted orders, no public argument, and no dramatic announcement. There was only Catherine's outstretched hand, Meghan's stunned expression, and a sentence that ended her final remaining access to one of the monarchy's most sacred family ceremonies. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan had been told weeks earlier that she could attend as a family guest. A royal christening, the Christian baptism of a child born into the royal family, carried meaning beyond one ceremony. To her, it was the final bridge connecting her children, the Sussex household, and the traditions Harry had inherited. She arrived believing that bridge still existed. Catherine did not step aside. She told Meghan that she would not be permitted to enter and that her access to future royal baptisms had been withdrawn. The Princess of Wales, the wife of the heir, spoke calmly, yet every word landed like a public verdict. Meghan looked beyond her, waiting for an aide to correct the mistake. No one moved. Her hand remained extended toward the doorway as confidence gave way to humiliation. She asked whether Charles knew. Catherine answered that the king had been informed and would not intervene. His absence allowed the future queen to carry the decision without forcing him into another confrontation with his son's wife. Catherine felt the cruelty of the moment, but she held her ground. She believed one uncertain entrance could turn a sacred ceremony into another battle over status, access, and blame. Protecting the child and preserving the service mattered more than avoiding Meghan's anger, even if the choice deepened the wound. Then Meghan understood something darker. William had approved the restriction before that morning. The prince believed hesitation at the chapel door would destabilize the christening, so he gave Catherine full authority to enforce the boundary. His silence transformed her gesture from a personal refusal into the ruling of a future king. As Meghan was escorted away, she demanded to know what had changed. Catherine gave no answer. The truth reached back months to a private rehearsal, a confidential family arrangement, and one conversation she had never forgiven. The chapel door had closed in seconds, but the decision behind it had been forming for months, and to understand why Catherine refused to move, the personal stakes facing every member of the family had to be exposed. The confrontation was never simply about entering a chapel. For Meghan, the christening represented belonging, recognition, and proof that her children had not been erased from royal memory. For Catherine, it represented something entirely different: privacy, continuity, and the protection of a family ritual from a conflict that had already consumed too many public moments. Standing on opposite sides of the doorway, both women believed they were defending their children, and neither believed the other could be trusted. Meghan carried the rejection away from the chapel like a wound she could not hide. Royal christenings, baptisms that welcome a child into the church and royal tradition, were among the last customs linking her household to the institution Harry had known since birth. She believed attending would prove that leaving royal duty had not erased family belonging. When Meghan spoke to Harry, her anger broke through restraint. She told him Catherine had not rejected only a former working royal. She had rejected an aunt, a mother, and 2 children who still carried royal blood. Meghan insisted she had promised to enter quietly, avoid the press, and leave without creating a scene. Being treated as a threat felt like a judgment on her motherhood. Catherine carried a different fear. Over time, she had become the senior royal trusted to protect ceremonies involving the next generation. She coordinated with clergy, parents, security officers, and household staff, because one disruption could turn a ceremony into another public battle. Her authority was not ceremonial, it was practical, personal, and difficult to separate from the family's unresolved wounds. She remembered previous breaches. Private details had reached the public soon after Meghan learned them, and although Catherine could not prove intent, the pattern had destroyed confidence. One exception, she feared, could reopen the same cycle of speculation, competing accounts, and accusation. Before the christening, Harry had telephoned William and asked him not to punish Meghan for disputes involving adults. William listened in silence, then refused. He believed his brother was calling the invitation reconciliation, while avoiding the incident that had caused the restriction. Catherine volunteered to deliver the decision herself. Staff offered to manage Meghan through security, but she refused to hide behind officials. That choice made the rejection more human and ensured the pain would forever carry her name. Both women remembered one earlier rehearsal, when Meghan challenged who could stand beside the baptismal font, the ceremonial basin used during baptism. That request exposed a deeper fight over status, access, and control. Their conflict had become intensely personal, but the final rupture began during a ceremony no cameras were meant to witness, when one request transformed private discomfort into an irreversible royal boundary. Months before Catherine blocked the chapel entrance, the royal family gathered for what should have been a quiet christening rehearsal. Only close relatives, a clergyman, and a handful of trusted aides were present. Yet inside that nearly empty chapel, Meghan made a request that changed the atmosphere immediately. She wanted her position beside the font formally recognized, arguing that her children's royal blood entitled her to stand with the senior family. Catherine's answer was polite. Meghan's response made the disagreement impossible to forget. Meghan believed the baptism offered one last chance to show that distance from royal duty had not erased family standing. At St. George's Chapel, the royal church inside Windsor Castle, she and Harry had been placed in the second family row because neither held an active ceremonial role. She asked to stand beside William and Catherine during the blessing, insisting the arrangement reduced her children's connection to the crown. Catherine refused without raising her voice. She explained that positions beside the baptismal font, the basin used during a Christian baptism, reflected responsibility for the child and current royal service, rather than affection or rank. Her words remained controlled, but the boundary was unmistakable. Meghan had expected discussion. Instead, she received a final answer. When the aides left, restraint cracked. Meghan accused Catherine of using royal protocol to exclude her household while preserving the appearance of unity. Catherine replied that unity required trust, not ceremonial proximity, and that trust could not be demanded only when photographs, titles, or major family occasions were involved. Neither woman stepped back. Harry entered after hearing their voices and defended his wife. William moved beside Catherine and said the seating would remain unchanged. The brothers did not shout. Their clipped words were colder because they exposed the real dispute: who possessed authority to define belonging inside the royal family. 2 days later, a media commentator described the disagreement with disturbing precision, including Meghan's request to stand beside the font. Catherine felt betrayed. Only 6 relatives and 4 staff members had known. She made no public accusation, but that evening, she wrote a documented account and handed it to William, warning that no future christening should become a contest over prominence. William kept the account. Months later, he used it to approve the restriction Meghan faced at the chapel door. When she discovered Catherine's written version had helped justify the ban, she demanded a private meeting without aides, security, or palace language. The rehearsal had planted the grievance, but the coming confrontation would expose something even more dangerous. Catherine no longer saw herself as merely defending protocol. She believed she was defending the future of the monarchy from Meghan herself. Hours after being turned away, Meghan refused to leave the royal estate without confronting Catherine directly. The 2 women entered a small private sitting room with no aides, no husbands, and no officials to soften their words. Meghan remained standing. Catherine closed the door behind them. What followed was not a debate about protocol, but an emotional reckoning over motherhood, loyalty, public humiliation, and the question both had avoided for years: who had the right to decide whether Meghan still belonged? Meghan forced the meeting by telling a household official she would remain outside the estate gates until Catherine agreed to face her. The threat of a public standoff left little room for delay. Catherine accepted 10 minutes in a side room near the chapel, believing silence would now be more damaging than confrontation. "You decided I no longer belong before I even arrived," Meghan said. She accused Catherine of using a child's christening to deliver a punishment senior royals had been unwilling to state openly. A royal christening, the baptism of a child within the royal family, was supposed to represent continuity and belonging. Instead, Meghan said, it had been turned into proof that she was disposable. Her anger broke when she described standing outside while music continued inside and relatives passed without meeting her eyes. Meghan asked how she was supposed to explain that moment to her children. She had expected rejection as a former working royal. She had not expected to feel rejected as an aunt and mother. Catherine did not retreat. She said years of private conversations had repeatedly become public controversies, followed by fresh arguments over status, memory, and blame. Every attempt at peace, she insisted, had created another wound. Her voice tightened as she admitted that protecting her children now required boundaries she once hoped would never exist. Then Catherine revealed the decisive issue. A private security briefing had warned that Meghan's arrival could attract competing media teams and pressure for unauthorized photographs outside the chapel. The future queen believed the ceremony would be consumed before it began. Meghan offered everything: her telephone, a private entrance, no photographs, and an immediate departure after the blessing. Catherine hesitated, but said the problem was no longer one day's behavior. It was years without trust. Before leaving, Meghan asked whether Catherine would have made the same decision without William's support. Catherine's silence answered more than words could. That pause redirected the fury toward the brother who had remained unseen. Meghan left the room convinced Catherine had delivered the wound, but the power that made it permanent belonged elsewhere, and William's role was about to reveal how dramatically authority inside the monarchy had changed. Catherine may have stood at the chapel door, but she was not acting alone. Days before the christening, William reviewed the security assessment, the rehearsal record, and Harry's private appeal. Then he made a decision that altered more than one guest list. He authorized Catherine to control access to future ceremonies involving their household and the younger generation. With one quiet approval, the future king placed his wife between the Sussexes and the royal rituals they still believed belonged to them. William sat alone in his Windsor office with Catherine's documented account beside a confidential security summary. For nearly an hour, he read every line, returning again and again to one warning: ceremonial access must depend on trust, not family expectation. When his private secretary entered, the prince had already underlined it. Catherine carried influence far beyond her title. As mother to the direct heirs and the senior royal coordinating private religious occasions, she had become the person clergy, security officers, parents, and household staff consulted about invitations, photographs, and ceremonial positioning. A confirmation, the Christian rite in which a baptized person publicly affirms faith, now fell within that same protective authority. Harry's telephone call unsettled William more than he admitted. His brother reminded him of earlier baptisms, when the family stood together, despite private pain. For a moment, William considered making one exception. Then he imagined every boundary collapsing under emotional pressure, and the hesitation ended. The night before the ceremony, Catherine asked whether facing Meghan herself would destroy the last chance of reconciliation. William told her the decision had to feel human, not hidden behind guards. She accepted, knowing her face would become the symbol of a restriction they had approved together. The written direction went further than Meghan expected. It barred automatic attendance at private baptisms, confirmation preparations, and ceremonial gatherings controlled by the Wales household, unless every responsible family member agreed to a new invitation. This was not a temporary refusal. It was the formal end of assumed access. Charles read the order before the christening, removed his glasses, and set the paper down. The king felt the cost for Harry, but he refused to overrule William and Catherine on matters involving their children and household security. Until that moment, Harry still believed the chapel rejection concerned one ceremony, a painful decision that time, distance, or another family conversation might eventually reverse. He had not understood permanence was already written. When the full wording reached him, that belief collapsed. The chapel refusal had wounded Meghan, but the written order shattered Harry's belief that another invitation would eventually come, and his response ensured the fallout could no longer remain contained behind palace walls. Harry received the written restriction after Meghan had already described the chapel confrontation. He expected a carefully worded explanation, and perhaps a promise to reconsider. Instead, He found a permanent boundary covering future christenings and family religious ceremonies. He read the page twice, pressed his thumb against William's authorization, and then placed the document face down. In that moment, the argument stopped being about Meghan's rejected entrance. To Harry, it became proof that his family had planned a future without them. Harry read the conditions aloud while Meghan sat beside him. The order confirmed that she would no longer receive automatic invitations to private christenings connected to William and Catherine's household. A royal christening, the baptism of a child within the royal family, carried deep meaning. Harry could attend only through a separate invitation if security and media risks were acceptable. The separation became immediate. Direct contact between the Sussex and Wales households stopped, messages moved through private secretaries, and every future family occasion required written approval. Informal belonging had become permission. Harry telephoned William before his anger cooled. He accused his brother of hiding behind Catherine and allowing two women with years of unresolved pain to face each other while he stayed away. William answered that his wife had not been used as protection. She had exercised authority Harry repeatedly refused to recognize. Meghan listened as the argument hardened. Her anger faded when Harry reached the passages covering future ceremonies. She removed the hat she had planned to wear inside the chapel and returned it to its box. That act carried the truth neither wanted to say. There would be no corrected invitation and no later entrance. Then another message arrived. Harry could still attend alone if he accepted the conditions. Briefly, he considered it. Meghan told him to go if remaining connected to his family mattered more than refusing the decision. Her calmness made the choice painful because it forced him to confront the distance between his marriage and his royal past. Harry declined. He sent William a brief response stating that he would not enter a family ceremony while his wife remained outside. His empty seat became the first visible consequence of the order, and Charles felt it. After the blessing, the king looked toward that unused chair and asked Catherine to meet him alone. He had refused to overturn the restriction, but now feared silence had turned a necessary boundary into an unforgivable wound. Harry's empty chair made the cost impossible to ignore. And when Charles finally spoke privately with Catherine, the future queen faced a choice between softening the decision and defending the boundary that had already divided the family. After the christening guests departed, Charles asked Catherine to remain behind. No advisors joined them. No written briefing sat between them. The king stood near the empty chair Harry had refused to occupy and admitted that seeing it had shaken him. He did not ask Catherine to reverse the restriction. Instead, he asked whether a boundary could remain firm without becoming an act of permanent rejection. Catherine's answer became the turning point that transformed the day from punishment into a painful declaration of terms. Charles rested his hand on the back of Harry's unused chair before speaking again. The silence between them carried more weight than any formal meeting could have managed. A royal household, the family and staff responsible for supporting the working members of the monarchy, often relied on procedure to settle difficult questions. This conversation was different. Nothing stood between the king and the future queen except honesty. Catherine answered carefully. She said the ceremony had remained peaceful, exactly as every parent had hoped. But peace had come at a painful cost. Meghan's face at the chapel entrance had stayed with her. She admitted she had expected anger, disappointment, even harsh words. Yet she had not expected to witness such visible humiliation. Protecting the ceremony still felt necessary, but she quietly confessed that reaching a point where one woman had to block another broke her heart. Charles lowered his voice. He admitted that remaining away from the doorway had placed a burden on Catherine that should have been his to share. He believed distance would prevent further conflict, yet it had allowed Meghan to believe the monarch had abandoned her without explanation. That realization troubled him more than he had expected, because leadership sometimes demanded presence even when every choice carried pain. The king then reminded Catherine that he would not overturn decisions concerning the Wales children, their household, or security. Her authority was real, and he intended to respect it. Still, he gently observed that lasting leadership was measured not only by the strength of its boundaries, but also by whether those boundaries left a path for healing. Catherine nodded before offering one condition that surprised him. She proposed a written framework allowing Meghan to attend a future private ceremony only if advance agreement, complete confidentiality, no media coordination, and direct private communication were accepted by everyone involved. She refused to call it banishment. She wanted it understood as a boundary that could one day be crossed through restored trust. When Charles asked whether Meghan could still return before the gathering ended, Catherine answered softly but firmly, "No." Reversing the decision that afternoon would reward pressure rather than rebuild confidence. Compassion, she believed, could exist without pretending trust had already returned. Charles accepted the compromise and instructed the palace to describe the decision as a private family matter rather than a royal punishment. Yet even as those words were prepared, events outside the chapel had already escaped every careful plan. Inside the chapel, Catherine and Charles had found a painful moral balance. But outside its walls, a single image stripped away every careful distinction and turned a private boundary into a global royal drama. By evening, the private confrontation had become a worldwide image. Meghan stood near the chapel entrance with one hand raised. Catherine faced her from inside the doorway, and a security officer watched from several steps away. The photograph contained no sound, no explanation, and no record of the conversation. Yet it appeared to show one royal woman physically excluding another from a sacred family ceremony. Within hours, that frozen second became more powerful than every private reason behind the decision. The image escaped palace control before any official explanation could catch up. A long-lens photograph, taken from beyond the estate boundary, captured the instant before Meghan departed. The ceremony itself had remained private, but the exclusion was now undeniable. Palace officials could no longer describe the incident as confusion over timing, access, or security. The palace released a narrow statement. It said attendance at private royal christenings, baptisms held for children within the royal family, was decided by the child's parents and the household responsible for the ceremony. The statement insisted Meghan's family identity and her children's place within the wider family had not changed. Almost no one found that comforting. Catherine saw the photograph shortly before dinner. The angle made her raised arm appear colder than the moment had felt. She locked the tablet and asked William whether people would believe she had enjoyed humiliating Meghan. He answered that leadership often looked cruel when the history behind it remained invisible. His reassurance did not remove the weight from her. Meghan watched broadcasters replay the image while discussing rejection, hierarchy, and motherhood. Public sympathy arrived quickly, but it offered little relief. The world could now see that she had been stopped, yet the christening would forever be remembered for conflict rather than the child at its center. The next morning, the London Chronicle placed the image across its front page beneath 4 words: "The final royal door." Catherine appeared inside the chapel, while Meghan remained outside, reducing years of distrust to one brutal division. By midday, a crowd gathered near Windsor Castle. Some praised Catherine for defending privacy. Others held signs declaring, "Family should not need permission." The dispute had become a national argument over dignity, duty, and exclusion. For both women, silence had suddenly become more dangerous than any statement. Meghan rejected calls for an immediate interview. Instead, she wrote Catherine a private message by hand and sent it through a trusted intermediary. Its contents would decide whether retaliation or acceptance followed. The world had chosen sides based on a single photograph, but the true verdict would be decided privately, when Catherine opened Meghan's message and discovered whether anger or acceptance would have the final word. 2 days after the christening, Catherine received a handwritten message from Meghan. There was no demand for an apology, no warning of an interview, and no attempt to reopen the chapel door. Meghan wrote that she still believed the decision had been unnecessarily painful, but she would no longer seek automatic access to ceremonies controlled by the Wales household. Catherine read the message twice before placing it beside the written restriction. The conflict had not ended in reconciliation, it ended in recognition. Meghan understood that her relationship with the monarchy had changed beyond titles or family expectation. A royal christening, the Christian baptism of a child born into the royal family, no longer represented automatic belonging. She would attend only if William and Catherine offered an invitation. That choice was not surrender. It was a refusal to measure her children's worth through permission granted by others. Catherine answered through a written reply. She confirmed that Meghan had not been erased from family history and promised the children's relationships would not be deliberately blocked. Yet ceremonies managed by the Wales household, the family unit supporting William, Catherine, and their children, would remain protected. Trust would have to return through private conduct, not public pressure. Meghan closed the box holding the outfit she had prepared, and asked Harry to place it in storage. She told him one chapel doorway would not define their family. Harry heard the pain beneath her resolve, but understood she had stopped waiting for the monarchy to validate them through ceremony. Catherine returned to the chapel days later, and faced the place where everything had changed. She accepted that leadership could preserve order while damaging affection. The future queen knew some would never see compassion in her decision, but she could no longer confuse kindness with the absence of boundaries. Charles created a separate channel for contact with Harry and the Sussex children. The king could not repair trust between the couples, yet he refused to let one christening become total exile. William kept the restriction, believing reversal would weaken Catherine, but approved a pathway for future invitations if trust was rebuilt. No one had won. Meghan lost automatic access to a tradition she cherished. Catherine lost any claim to being viewed as a neutral peacemaker. The monarchy gained clarity at the price of intimacy. The door remained closed, not as an invitation to another battle, but as the final symbol of a family that had chosen painful clarity over the comforting illusion that nothing between them had permanently changed. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.